Hey guys, YouTuber 100 here. Alright, and continuing my Christmas reviews. Last week I reviewed Home Alone 1 for you guys, and now I'm going to review Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Now, before I get started with this review, I'd like to apologize for my Home Alone 1 review last week. The audio got way ahead of the video itself. And yeah, it was a poor editing job. I apologize for that. Yeah, for this review, I'll make sure that if the audio does get ahead of the video again, that I'll have the video and with the audio. I won't have the video going on after the audio is done. So yeah, I'll just make sure I get that done so you guys won't have to worry about that again. Alright, so anyway, okay. Home Alone 2 review. I thought this also was really good. I actually think it's better than Home Alone 1. I give this movie 3.25 or 3.5, somewhere in there. I'll decide with the rating of the movie in the description box after I upload the video. Alright, anyway. Yeah, of course you have the cast from the first movie back. You got Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, John Hurd, and Catherine O'Hara. And the movie also has some new cast members. There's Rob Schneider, of course. There's Tim Curry, Brenda Fricker, and a few other people. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, like I said, I give this movie like somewhere in the 3.25, 3.5 star range. Alright. Alright, so getting into the review. Alright, the movie starts basically the same way the first movie did, with a black background with the opening credits rolling, and it backs up, but this time it snows. Well, it was during the credits rolling. And we back out and we see the blue house. And then we see gray outlines of some New York City buildings coming into the house. And then the light from the house comes on and the title appears, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. And then we zoom in into the blue house until we can't see the gray outlines of the New York City buildings anymore. And then we cut into the actual movie where the family is packing up because they're going on a trip to Florida for Christmas. And it's pretty much the same kind of hectic style as it was in the beginning of the first movie. And then we cut to Kevin's parents' room, and he's watching a game show, and he has a voice recording thing called the Talk Boy. And he is having fun with it. He's recording something. The game show goes 200 points, alright. And then he records that and he plays it back on his Talk Boy. And then, as his mother was asking him questions if he's packed, he kept saying yes to his Talk Boy, and he played it back. And then his grandma turns out sent him an inflatable bozo clown to play with in the swimming pool at the hotel they're gonna go to. And Kevin, he's just wondering why they need to go to Florida, because no Christmas trees are in Florida, and he's just wondering how you can have Christmas without a Christmas tree. And then the game show cuts to a commercial of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, and Kevin records that commercial. And then the dad is looking for batteries for his camcorder. And the mom said that she put them in the charger. And so the dad unplugs their clock. And he gets the batteries and puts it back in, and it goes to midnight again. Like it did in the first movie when the power went out. And then the kids had a Christmas pageant that night, and the dad wanted Kevin to go get his typewriter. But it was in the bathroom, and he said he couldn't go because his uncle was taking a shower in there. And he said that if his uncle saw him, if Kevin walked in and saw his uncle naked, that he would grow up never feeling like a real man. So the dad just told him to run in real quick and get his tie and get out and just not look at anything. And then Kevin was, as Kevin was walking to the bathroom, we heard the song "Cool Jerk" from the 1960s. His uncle was singing it, and as he just got in to get his tie, he opened his eyes and he saw his uncle in the shower singing that song, and he was dancing to it. And so Kevin recorded that with his talk boy. And then his uncle eventually caught him, spying on him, and he told him to get out or he's gonna slap him silly. And so then during that Christmas pageant, and Kevin and his brothers and sisters and just a bunch of people that went to his school, they were singing like Christmas carols. And then during Kevin's solo in that pageant, Buzz, his older brother, he used his fake candle and another guy's fake candle, and he put them like right behind Kevin's ears, and everybody was laughing at that. And then Kevin eventually caught Buzz doing that, so he pushed him back, and then all of the choir, they all fell down. And then when Buzz was just sucking up to everyone, and he gave a phony apology to Kevin. And as everyone else was expecting Kevin to apologize back to him, they were all just staring at him like they could tell he was going to say no, so they were just looking at him like. And then he looked at Buzz, and he was just like, "Beat that, you little trout sniffer." And then not Buzz, Kevin, he was telling everyone that they were all stupid to believe Buzz's lies, and he didn't care if the Florida trip got messed up, because who would want to spend Christmas in a tropical climate? And then the mom and dad were telling Kevin that if he walked out of that room, he would sleep on the 3rd floor again. And this Kevin Fuller was like, "Yeah, with me." And then his uncle told him he better not wreck his trip because his dad was paying good money for it. Then Kevin responded by saying, "You wouldn't want to spoil your fun, Mr. Cheapskate." And then everyone just couldn't believe he said that, so they were just like looking at each other shocked. And then Buzz said, "What a troubled young man." Then while Kevin was laying in bed on the 3rd floor, the mom came up and tried to talk to him about what happened. And then he reminded them about what happened last year, which was the first movie. Yeah, I forgot to mention that this movie takes place a year after the first movie. So yeah. And Kevin said that he was getting crapped on. And the mom said that that's not what happened last time, that's not what is happening this time, and Buzz apologized to him. And then Kevin told the mom what Buzz said to him about him calling him a trout sniffer, not meaning what he said. So the mom just said he should sit up there and think things over, and then when he's ready to apologize to the family that he can come down. But Kevin refused to apologize, said he'd rather kiss a toilet seat, so the mom told him that he could just stay up there the rest of the night. And then Kevin just responded, he said he couldn't trust anyone in the family, and if he had his own money, he'd go on his own vacation alone, and he'd had the most fun of his life. And the mom reminded him that he got his wish last year, and he might get it again this year. And Kevin said, "I hope so." And then during that night, the wind was blowing a piece of newspaper, and then it got up to the family house's door, and it showed Harry and Marv. It was an article that said, "What Bandits," which was their nickname from the first movie, they escaped during a prison riot. And so the next morning, the 2 vans from the airport came again. Yeah, but because the dad unplugged the clock and didn't set the time again, it stayed on the midnight, and so they slept in again, and so they were all rushing again like they did from the first movie. And then as they were handing out the tickets for the plane, and the mom was handing them out to her family, and the aunt was handing them out to her family. And as she was handing them out, she saw that Kevin's ticket was there, and she thought that they were going to leave him there again, but Kevin was in the front seat of the van. And he said that it was a good thing that he had his own ticket in case they would try to ditch him. And as they arrived at the airport, Kevin was telling his dad that he needed some batteries for his stock boy, and the dad said that they were in his bag and he'd give it to him on the plane. But Kevin was impatient. He wanted to get the batteries as quick as he can, so he took his dad's bag with him. him as they were trying to run to the plane again, just like in the first movie. And because of Kevin's impatience, he stopped running and put the batteries in his talk boy, so then he got split from his family. And there was another flight to New York that was in the final boarding process, so this other guy that looked like Kevin's dad from behind, he was running to his plane, and Kevin mistook that guy for his dad, so he was running after that guy. So as the family got to their Florida plane gate, they wanted they told the security guards to make sure that everyone got on the plane, and everyone who was there, obviously except for Kevin, they all got onto the plane. And Kevin continued to chase after that guy he thought was his dad. And as he was running into the New York plane gate, Kevin ran into the flight attendant and he was telling her that his family was on the plane. He didn't want to be left behind. And he said that his boarding pass was somewhere, he couldn't find it. And another attendant told the flight attendant that he ran into to make sure that he saw his family on the plane before the attendant would leave him. So Kevin saw that guy he thought was his dad. He told the attendant that it was his dad. So he took a seat on the plane. And as Kevin was sitting down, he was looking around the plane. He didn't see any members of his family there at all, but he just shook it off. He was like, And right before the plane was about to take off, Kevin asked the guy he was sitting next to if he'd ever been to Florida. But the guy was speaking French to Kevin, so Kevin didn't understand anything he was saying. So he had plugged in some headphones to his top boy and just played some music. As another flight attendant was saying, and it was ready. They were ready to go to New York, and she even said non-stop to New York. And so the plane took off, and so did the Florida plane his family was on. And the mom had the feeling that she had in the first movie again. And she was like, she didn't think that they forgot anything, she just had the feeling again. And the dad was just telling her it was just bad memories, that they did everything, brought everything, have everybody, and there was nothing to worry about. And so the mom told him that he was right. And then we saw a screening of both planes, plane to Florida and New York, and they went opposite directions. The Florida plane went down south as the New York plane went northeast. And then we saw the New York plane land, and Kevin stepped out and into the airport. And he was calling for his family, but he didn't find any of them, and he saw them close the door to the plane. And then at the Florida airport where his family was at, as they were picking up their luggage, as they got to Kevin's bag, they were handing it down. Everyone, they were saying, "Give this to Kevin." And then his cousin Fuller, he saw Kevin wasn't there, so he just handed it back and said, "Kevin's not here," and everyone kept saying, "Kevin's not here, Kevin's not here." They didn't know what they were saying. And when they got to the end, she could kind of understand what it was, because when she said, she was like, "Kevin's not here." And then when the mom said to the dad, "Kevin's not here," the dad could realize what she said, and he was like, "What?" And so the mom was just laughing for a second, then she screamed, "Kevin!" and fainted. And as Kevin was looking out the window of the airport, he could see that there were the New York buildings. Like, he saw the Empire State Building, that's the only one on him, and then he gasped. And then he went to a front desk and asked the flight attendant what city it was, and she told him it was New York. And he was like, "Yikes, I did it again." And then he went to sit down, and he just said, "My family's in Florida and I'm in New York." And then he started to smile, said it again. And then he raised his eyebrows like, And so he went to explore New York, or he took a ride in a taxi, and he was just taking pictures. Yeah, he was in front of Radio City Music Hall at one point. He went to Chinatown, he bought some fireworks. He took a look at the Statue of Liberty, and he went up to the top of the Twin Towers. And he could see like pretty much the whole city, so he took a picture of that. And then it zoomed out of Kevin on top of the Twin Towers, and you could see how high it was. And then we saw the mom and dad talking to an airport security guard, and he was asking them questions about Kevin. What was his name? When did they see him last? And when they noticed he was missing, did everybody get through security? And they were telling the security guard that they didn't know if everyone got through because they were in a hurry and they had to run to the gate. And he was asking if this had happened before, and at first they said no, but then they said yes. And they told him what happened, that he was left at home by accident last year. So the security guard told them that they would call Chicago and notify them. And he told them that he's most likely to be there, and it's really unlikely if he'd be anywhere else. So as Kevin was continuing to explore New York, or there was a fish truck coming towards him, so he ran out of the way. And then they opened up that fish truck, and we saw Harry and Marv rise up from behind some crates. And so they were exploring New York also. And they were talking about they would get some phony passports and hightail to some foreign country. And Marv was like, Arizona, which is here. And then Marv got a handful of some donating change, you know, those things where there's a Santa nearby and they ask for some change donations. And Harry was like, it's real smart to bust out of jail and rob 14 cents. And Marv said every little bit helps. And he gave them a new nickname. They called themselves the Sticky Bandits. And then Kevin he saw Plaza Hotel, and he was just quoting that commercial he saw. And then he looked, and he saw a lady with pigeons all over her. And she looked kind of scary to him, and he was like, sick, so he ran off. And then, as they were crossing the street, some people crossing the street from both sides. Yeah, Harry accidentally got hit in the chest by Kevin, but he didn't realize it. And Harry turned back. And he just shook it off. He told Marv he thought he saw something. And then Marv accidentally bumped into a lady, and his hand got stuck to her purse, and he actually pulled it off, and Marv said something, and I think it was French, and then the lady slapped him. Marv was like, I think she likes me. And then Kevin went into Plaza Hotel. And he was just taking a look around. And then he eventually would approach Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump. He asked where the lobby was, and Donald Trump told him it was down the hall and to the left. And then Kevin got out his talkboy and played the commercial that he recorded of Plaza Hotel, and gave him a phone number of how to call the hotel to make a reservation. So he said that he'd do that, and then he recorded his voice, just pretended that it was his dad. Like, how do you do? I'd like a hotel room with an extra large bed, a TV, and those little refrigerators. And credit card, you got it. And then he dialed the number from the commercial, and then one of the service people was talking to him, and Kevin played that message he recorded to pretend it was his dad, but he made it sound lower voice than what it was before, or when Kevin was talking. And so then the person told him that he would need a major credit card applied check-in, and said he'd do that. And Then he would later approach the front desk, and that's where the concierge of the hotel, who's played by Tim Curry, saw Kevin walk up to the desk, and he was talking to the person, to the lady that was in charge of the front desk, and he was telling her the story, like he's barely to look over the counter, and he wouldn't dare check in by himself, like a reservation for himself rather. He told her that he was traveling with his dad and he was on a meeting and he couldn't go into any rooms with him, so the dad dropped him off at the hotel and gave him his credit card or so he could pay or something for the hotel. And he wouldn't get into mischief, and he said everyone gets into mischief. And then back at the Florida airport, the security guard called Chicago and they said there was no sign of him. And so he was telling the parents that they're going to need to have a way to get a hold of him. And he was asking if they had a recent photo of Kevin. The dad said that he had one in his wallet, but he didn't have his wallet on him. It was in his bag, and that Kevin had his wallet. The security guard asked him if he had credit cards in the wallet. And the security guard said that they notified the credit card companies, and if Kevin used the credit card, that they could get a location on him if he ever used it. But the mom said that she doesn't think Kevin even knows how to use a credit card, but it turns out he did. And then so the concierge told one of the bag boys, who's played by Rob Schneider, to find out everything he could about Kevin. And as the bag boy was escorting Kevin to his room, he told him that Herbert Hoover once stayed on the floor that Kevin was on. And he showed him his suite, and Kevin looked around. He saw the bed and the bathroom and a cupboard filled with a bunch of goodies. And then the bag boy looked into Kevin's bag and he saw an identification card of his dad's. And then the bag boy was asking Kevin if the temperature in the room was alright and if he knew how the TV worked, and Kevin said TV was his life. And then the bag boy was asking for a tip, and then Kevin gave him a strip of gum. He said there's plenty more where that came from. And then Kevin later on went to the pool while we heard the song Jingle Bell Rock playing. And everybody was looking at Kevin because he was all by himself. He asked a couple of guys if they would be bothered if Kevin would work on his cannonballs, and one of the guys said no. So Kevin jumped into the pool and his swim trunks came off. He was like, yikes! And Kevin was watching a sequel to the movie Angels with Filthy Souls from the first movie. This one was called Angels with Even Filthier Souls. Well, another room attendant or whatever, was giving Kevin some room service. And it was pretty much the same thing as the first movie, except Johnny, this time he was talking to some woman. And then he pretty much did the same thing he did in the first movie. I'm not gonna... There's really no need for me to go through any of that again. Yeah, so, he just counted to 3, shot her with a Tommy gun, and Kevin covered his eyes just like the first movie. Then the concierge later on went to Kevin's room. He knocked on it, said housekeeping. And so Kevin rushed into the bathroom, turned on the shower. The concierge got into the room. He saw that the shower was going, so he walked into the bathroom. Kevin turned on the Cool Jerk tune that he recorded from his uncle earlier in the movie. And then the concierge stepped into the bathroom. He saw that there was someone in the shower that were dancing, kind of like his uncle was earlier in the movie. And then we later see that it was the inflatable clown that Kevin was given at the beginning of the movie, and Kevin was controlling it as a puppet and making it move. And Kevin had the clown turn over, make it look like he was yelling at the concierge, and it played the where his uncle was yelling at Kevin, telling him to get out or will slap him silly. And then the concierge gave a weird scream like, "Ugh!" And he ran out of the room, but on the way, as he was running, he hit his leg on a stool. Well, and then we'd see that his family arriving at the hotel they'd stay at in Florida while they were playing It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year. And then Kevin was going through some stuff of his dad. He was looking at, I think it was an address book, where he saw that another one of his uncles lived there. It was the uncle that they were staying, whose house they were staying at in the first movie when they were in Paris. Yeah, it was that uncle. And then he was looking at that photo that his dad was talking about earlier. He said he had in his wallet. And then he went to the window of the hotel. He told his mom good night, and then the mom in Florida told Kevin good night. So the next morning, the bag boy brought him back some underwear, where Kevin told him to not flash them around there, that could be girls on the floor, and the bag boy told him he was very careful. And Kevin was going to give him another tip, but yeah, the bag boy still had some of the gum left and said it wouldn't be necessary. But this time it was cash. It was at least $100. You could see 250s in that roll of money Kevin had. And Kevin was like, "No tip? Alright." And the bag boy was like, wait. Yeah, but Kevin shut the door. And then the concierge later approached Kevin and told him what he was doing last night. He said he was checking to make sure everything was in order. And Kevin was pretending that the clown was his dad, and told him that he was really mad and didn't come all the way to New York to get his naked rear end spied on. And then, yeah, Kevin was given a limo ride and a cheese pizza. And while Kevin was riding in the limo eating the pizza, they were playing the animated Grinch, which is real great. Might review that sometime. Yeah, and Kevin asked the driver if there were any good toy stores that he could take them to, and the driver said yes. And and also the concierge was trying to see what was going on with Kevin, see if he was really with his dad or if he was alone. So we looked through the reservation slip of Kevin's dad, and he was looking through it, and it showed that the credit card was stolen. And then we saw Harry Marv at some ice skating place. And Marv was told by Harry that they needed to talk. And so, while they were talking, Marv was taking some stuff from other people. He took a scarf and a pair of mittens and some earmuffs and a hat. And they needed to find a place to rob because they need some cash. And then Harry showed Marv where they could rob, and it was a toy store called Duncan's Toy Chest. And Marv said it was brilliant. And it turns out Duncan's Toy Chest was the toy store that Kevin was taken to. And as Kevin was looking around in the toy store, Harry and Marv were hiding in these little houses. And then we saw what their conversation about what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. And then Kevin was buying some stuff, and he was talking to the cashier that is helping him, out. And Kevin was telling him that he was afraid of his own shadow and he wouldn't dare shop alone. And then the price for stuff he bought was $23.75 or something like that. And then the cashier asked him where he got all the money. And Kevin told him that he had a lot of grandmothers. And then Kevin was telling him that it was a nice toy store and the Mr. Duncan guy who owns it should be proud. And the cashier was telling him that he loves kids and that they were having a thing going on where all the money that they made that day in the cash register, that Mr. Duncan would donate it to a children's hospital. And then Kevin decided to give them $20 to give to the hospital. And the reward for that, the cashier told him that he could select an item from a Christmas tree that was on the stand. He could select an item to take home with him. And the cashier suggested that Kevin takes some turtle doves with him. He told him what he could do with them. He said he kept one. He would keep one and give the other one to a very special person. And as long as they would have the turtle dove, they'd be friends forever. And then as Kevin was leaving, he saw a portrait on the wall that showed a picture of Mr. Duncan, and it turns out that Mr. Duncan was actually that cashier that was helping him. So yeah, so that cashier was Mr. Duncan all along. And as Kevin, one of the things Kevin bought in the toy store was a map of New York. And as Harry and Marv left the toy store, they saw Kevin right there, and they were gonna try to get him. And so they walked right behind Kevin. Harry said, "Hiya, pal." And Kevin was shocked. He dropped his map. He looked back and he saw them. And as Marv pulled his hand out to try to grab Kevin, Kevin screamed really loud. Everyone could hear him. And he ran off. And so Harry and Marv were chasing him. And then, as Kevin was running, there was the stand he passed by where they were selling some necklaces to like a special, like, buy now, avoid the Christmas rush or something. So Kevin bought a few of them, and then as Kevin was just like really close to Plaza Hotel, he took all the beads off of the necklaces, and Harry and Marv tripped over them. And then, as Kevin got back to the Plaza Hotel, he was telling the concierge to help him because Harry and Marv were going after him. And then the concierge got the credit card, and he said, "Why, store wouldn't take your stolen credit card? Let's see what the police have to say about this." So Kevin ran into the hotel before the concierge could grab him. So the concierge was chasing Kevin in the hotel, and Kevin then approached the bag boy. Or he tried to grab him too, but he couldn't. And then as Kevin was running towards the woman who helped him check into the hotel, Kevin just slid under her legs and slid into the elevator, and then the concierge and the bag boy ran into her. They all fell down. And as Kevin was going up the elevator, he even said, "I committed credit card fraud." And so the concierge, the bag boy, and the woman who helped Kevin, they got security, went up to his hotel room, and Kevin said that he had enough of the vacation and he was going home. And as the concierge, bag boy, the woman, and the security got into Kevin's hotel room, he played the Angels with Even Filthier Souls tape, and he did pretty much the same thing he did in the first movie with the pizza guy. And he had Johnny say some lines from that movie, and then the concierge would respond to them. And at one point, it was hilarious. Johnny said, "Get down on your knees and tell me you love me." So all of them got down on their knees. The concierge said, "I love you." And Johnny said, "You gotta do better than that." And then all of them shouted, "I love you." And then pretty much the same thing in the first movie with the gunshots. All of them got out of the hotel room, and you heard the gunshots. Everybody else that had hotel rooms, they heard it, so they all stepped out of their hotel rooms and looked over. And the concierge told everyone to stay in their rooms because there was an insane guest with a gun. And then Kevin ran out of the hotel through the fire escape, and then he jumped off. But Harry and Marv were right out there waiting for him, and then as Kevin was coming down, they grabbed him, and they saw his plane ticket to Florida, and they were like, "Looks like you won't be needing this," so Harry ripped that all up, and then they took Kevin with them. They said that they were going to take him to the subway tunnel and they would feel a lot better once they get him on ice. And then at one point, they ran back into that woman that slapped Marv earlier. Here, and Marv smiled. He's like, "Well, hello." And then the woman punched him in the face, and Marv fell down. And then she later punched Carrie too. And so Kevin and ran off, and he went into Central Park. And her and Marv were chasing after him, trying to find him. And Kevin hid in the back of a chariot or something. And then Harry and Marv were running through a bunch of kids. And Marv thought he saw Kevin, but Harry told him that it wasn't him. And they said that Kevin was going to have a lot of fun trying to last in the park alone. So they walked off. And then back at Florida, the mom got a call from the security at the airport. They found out where Kevin was, that he was in New York, and they found out everything that they were doing, that he did, used the credit card to check in the Plaza hotel, and that Kevin ran away from the hotel and now he was on his own. And so then the family was packing. They were going to go to New York. And then the dad was telling the mom that Kevin might be able to go to his brother's place, which was what I mentioned earlier. And yeah, and the mom reminded him that they might be in Paris, and the dad told him that they might have a house sitter, but it turns out that his place was being renovated. So Kevin approached that house of his uncle, and he saw that there was nobody there. So he was just taking a walk through New York, and he was seeing what New York was like at night. I'm sure you all know what talking about, a bunch of thugs out there. And Kevin was beginning to, he was freaking out, and he got into a taxi, and the taxi driver there, he was just creepy as crap. Yeah, so Kevin ran out of that taxi and just ran off where no one could see him. And then he was eating some cookies that he got from that cabinet of goodies from his hotel room before he left. And then some pigeons approached him, and Kevin would give the pigeon some of the cookies, and then they turned out they ate them all. And then that bird lady he saw earlier rose up. Kevin screamed, but his foot got stuck. He couldn't run off. And as the bird lady got closer to him, he just covered up, and the bird lady released his foot from being stuck. And then Kevin started to run off. But then Kevin was starting to think maybe she's not so bad after all. So he ran back. He apologized for screaming in her face. And he was telling her why he did it, because she kind of looks scary at first. When he thinks about it, it's not so bad. And he was asking how the pigeons are always coming into her. And so she handed him some bird seed, I think it was, and Kevin threw it up in the air, and the pigeons flew all around. And then later on, the bird lady would take Kevin to some place quiet, or so-called quiet. Yeah, and it was like way in a booth, I think it was, of a theater where they were doing a symphony. And then Kevin and the bird lady were having a conversation about how she ended up like that. And how Kevin is with his family. Yeah, it was pretty much kind of like the conversation in the first movie that Kevin had with Fullman and Marley. And then later on, Kevin was outside of that children's hospital where Duncan's Toy Chest was donating their money to. And then a kid in there waved at Kevin, and Kevin waved back. And Kevin was thinking about what Mr. Duncan told him about the money in the cash register that Mr. Duncan was donating to the children's hospital. And then he thought about something Marv said. Yeah, I forgot to say earlier, when they grabbed Kevin, they told him that they were going to rob Duncan's toy chest. And so Kevin then ran over to his uncle's house. He climbed up a sewer pipe, and then he set up some traps like he did in the first movie. And this time the traps were much more, what's the word I'm looking for? They were more sophisticated, let's just say that. Yeah, he loaded a tool chest up and put it just right up to a flight of stairs going down. he put some slippery slime or paint or something on the floor. He attached some jumper cables to a sink. He put some more of that slimy, slippery stuff on a step of a ladder. And he filled a toilet with some gasoline or propane or something. Then he soaked a rope in kerosene, and he put a big hole in the floor. And then the family arrived at the Plaza Hotel. The concierge, the bag boy, and the woman who was helping Kevin check in. They were telling the family why they did what they did and how Kevin checked in. And the mom asked, "What kind of idiots do you have working here?" And they responded, "The finest in New York." And they asked why they let Kevin leave. And the concierge told them when they attempted to confront him, he ran. And the mom said that it was the concierge's fault that Kevin was lost in New York. And the dad said he was going to go down to the police station and make sure they were doing everything they could to find Kevin. And then the mom said that she was going to go out to look for him. And then later on, it became midnight. Duncan's toy chest was locked up. Harry and Marv were in their houses, and they got out to get ready to rob. They had their crowbars. Harry opened up the cash register, and Marv opened up a chest that was filled with money. And then Kevin would get it there. He set up a thing like he put a piece of wood on a garbage can or something, like it was a teeter-totter. And then he took a couple of pictures of Harry and Marv, and he threw something with a note attached to it through a window, and it broke. And Harry and Marv were jumped out, and they came down on that piece of wood that was positioned like a teeter-totter. Harry came down first, and then Marv jumped on. And then Harry was launched into the air, and he came down on a car and destroyed it. Then Kevin took another picture of Harry and Marv and ran off. And the mom approached the uncle's house, but no one was there. And right when she left, Kevin arrived, and he climbed back up the sewer pipe, up to the top. Harry and Marv were just running, trying to chase after him. They didn't even know where he was. And then they saw Kevin at the top of the house, and they said, "Let's kill." And then they were trying to trick Kevin. Harry was telling him that if Kevin would throw down the camera, they wouldn't hurt him, and you never hear from them again. So then there was a bunch of bricks right next to Kevin. Kevin threw a few of them down. Each one hit Marv in the head. And so Harry and Marv decided to split up. Marv went through the front, and then Harry went around the back. And Marv went up a flight of stairs and up to the door, tried to open it, but yeah, it was just a rope attached to the knob. Marv continued to pull. Well, it wasn't a rope, it was string. I'm sorry. And then we saw a nail gun. Or maybe it was a staple gun. It was one of the two. Yeah, and then it was tied around the trigger of it. And then Marv pulled it so hard that the trigger pulled. It pulled the trigger, and it got Marv in the butt. And Marv shouted, "Yow!" And then Marv turned around, the trigger pulled again, got Marv in the nuts. Then Marv got down to his knees, pulled the trigger again, got him in the nose, and then Marv just fell back. Then Harry went up to that ladder that Kevin put the slime on. Harry tried to jump up onto it, but it was slippery, so Harry's hands slipped off and Harry fell back. And then a little piece of the slime got on Harry's forehead. It kind of looked like Jello. Then Harry was just muttering a bunch of stuff. And then Marv pulled all the staples out, kicked the door open. He was like, "I've reached the top." Then he fell through down that big hole and down to the ground. And we heard his neck pop. He was like, "Grrr." And then we saw Harry stepping up to a door, and we saw Kevin and setting up a bag of tools right above the door. And then Harry could hear Kevin running off. He was like, "You gotta do better than this, kid." And Harry kicked the door open, and all the tools fell out of that bag, knocked Harry down. And then there was one more wrench dangling, and that fell down and hit Harry. Then Marv got back up, and as he was walking, he was slipping through all that slime that Kevin shot on the floor. And he was just slipping around all over the place, then fell back, and he rolled towards a big drawer. No, not drawer. Yeah, big stand where there were a bunch of paints on the shelves, and it fell all on Marv. And then as Harry got back up, he was clicking some lights on, and he was like being real careful. Each time a light would come on, he would kind of move away in case there were more tools or something else that were going to come down on him. And then we saw Marv covered in paint, and we saw it in his mouth, which was nasty. And then as Marv was trying to get it off, he went to that sink and attached jumper cables to, and he turned on some power. And then Marv was trying to get electrocuted with it, and that was hilarious. Yeah, and Kevin kept turning it up higher. Then it got so high once that we actually saw Marv as a skeleton at one point. Yeah, so that was hilarious. And then we continued to see Harry be real careful with the lights, clicking them on. And at one point he turned one on and it set his head on fire again, just like in the first one with the blowtorch. And then he was trying to extinguish the fire. He went to a sink in the bathroom, it didn't turn on. And then he stuck his head in the toilet, which was filled with gasoline or propane or something. And he got in a huge explosion. And then we saw Harry get his head out of the toilet, and we saw his face. It was just so black, and it was in his mouth. And then Marv continued to walk. He got up from being electrocuted by the sink, and he saw that there was a rope there, and it looked like it was just tied to something, but it was tied around a big bag of cement. And it was before it was mixed, so it was like pretty much flat. Marv said he was coming up, and as he jumped onto the rope, it fell down, and then he saw the bag of cement. It was 100 pounds. He saw it coming down and hit him in the face, and he got covered with it. And as he sat up, he's like, "I'm gonna murder that kid." So Marv set up a big thing with a bunch of objects so he could get back up to where he was before, or where that rope led to. And as he got his arms onto the barrier or whatever, all the stuff knocked down, so he was doing all he could to hang on and not fall. And Kevin could see Harry was trying to get the stuff out of his mouth. So Kevin climbed up a ladder, and Marv could see him doing it, so he called Harry, said where he was, and going on the ladder. And as Harry was climbing the ladder too, Kevin cut something in the ladder to make it break. And so Harry fell down. When the ladder tipped over and Harry fell, Marv finally got up there, helped Harry up. Kevin told him they should try the stairs to get up to where he was. And Harry could sense that it was probably something like what happened last year, where Kevin threw the paint can at them. But they were just pretending to walk up the stairs. Harry was like, "Let's get him," but he was just like walking in place. So Kevin threw down a paint can. They pretended that it hit him. Like, "Oh, he buzzed me right in my mouth, Marv." And then Marv said, "I'll get him." And Kevin threw down another paint can. Marv pretended that hit him. And then they were like, "Come on, let's get him." And then Kevin threw down a huge pipe down at them. And it was like, oops, and the pipe hit them, and they fell all the way back down that hole. And then Kevin cut the pipe down, and then it fell back on them. And so they set up another thing with objects Marv made to get up to that place. Marv said it was as solid as a rock. And then right when they got up, it tipped over. Harry was like a rock, huh, Marv? And Kevin said, "You guys give up?" Marv said, "Never." And so they went up to a door, pulled the knob, but all they pulled was some string attached to it, and it was that tool chest. And they could hear it coming down the stairs, but they didn't quite know what it was. Harry was like, "What's that sound?" And then finally, when it came down to the door, it pushed them back to the wall. And then Marv told them what it was. He said that was the sound of a tool chest falling down the stairs. And then they snapped their noses into position. And then Kevin was climbing down that rope he soaked with kerosene. And then Marv and Harry were starting to climb down too. And Marv could smell something. He asked Harry if he was wearing aftershave. Harry told him it was kerosene, that the rope was soaked in it. Marv was like, "Why would anyone soak a rope in kerosene?" And then Kevin lit a match. He said, "Merry Christmas," set the rope on fire. So, and then Harry and Marv were climbing up the rope, trying to get away from it, off of it, so they wouldn't get burned. And then they eventually let go, and they were falling down that rope, and they fell to the ground. And then they saw a bunch of paint cans, and they came down on them, and they were buried in them. And then Kevin called the cops, said that they were in the park, and to look for fireworks. And as Kevin was running away from them, he slipped on some ice, so Harry and Marv got him. And they were going for a little stroll in the park, and Harry pulled out a gun. And then Marv was like, he knew that something was going on, and they said they should leave, and Harry just told him to shut up. And Harry said that he never made it to the 6th grade, and it doesn't look like Kevin would make it either. Then the bird lady stopped them. He stopped them. She threw some bird seed on them, and pigeons came after them. And then Kevin lit up the fireworks, and then the police arrived. They arrested Harry and Marv. And then the police were talking to Mr. Duncan. And one of the policemen, they found that note Kevin threw in, and Mr. Duncan read it. Then the mom was continuing to look for Kevin. She was talking to a cop about what he'd do if one of his kids were missing, and the cop said that he probably did the same thing she's doing. And she asked where she think would Kevin be, and she knew where he was, that he was in Rockefeller Center because of the big Christmas tree. And Kevin was like saying what he wanted for Christmas. He just wants his family back, and he needs to tell his mom that he's sorry. Then the mom got there, and they apologized to each other. And then the next morning at the Plaza Hotel, everyone was in bed, and Kevin was telling Fuller not to get his hopes up because he didn't think Santa Claus would visit hotels, and Fuller told him that he's omnipresent, he goes everywhere. And then they got into the living room, and they saw there were a bunch of presents there, and we saw that some of them were from Duncan's toy chest. And Buzz was telling everyone that they should thank Kevin, because if it wasn't for him, then they wouldn't be in there with all that stuff. And then, as they were all opening presents, Kevin saw on the Christmas tree there were turtle doves, so he ran out and gave the bird lady one of the turtle doves. And he told them what Mr. Duncan told them, as they had a turtle dove, they'd be friends forever. Then eventually the bag boy would come to their hotel room. He would give Buzz the room service bill Kevin had. And then Buzz looked at it. Before that, the bag boy asked for a tip again. And Buzz gave him a piece of gum that he was already chewing to him. Yeah, so anyway, back to that. Buzz looked at the room service bill. Turned out the total was $967. And then the dad yelled at Kevin, "You spent $967 on room service?" And then Kevin ran off, and that was the end of the movie. Alright, so there's Home Alone 2 review. Yeah, like I said, 3.25, 3.5 stars, somewhere in there. Alright, yeah, this video is already long as crap, so yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.